Grading a multiple choice test? That's the easy part. But how do you actually put a score on a conversation or an essay? In this explainer, we are diving deep into one of the trickiest parts of language teaching, how we grade productive skills like speaking and writing. It's kind of part art, part science, and we're going to break it all down for you. So let's just jump right in with the big question, right? I mean, think about it. This isn't like a math problem where there's just one right answer. A conversation or an essay can be good in a million different ways. So how do we take that messy, creative human performance and boil it down to a score that's fair and actually means something? That's really the puzzle we're trying to solve here. So, to figure this all out, here's our game plan. First, we'll talk about what the art of scoring even is. Then, we'll get into that big choice between objective and subjective judgment. After that, we'll crack open what I like to call the assessor's toolkit. To check out 3 core methods, we'll zoom in on the power tool that is the rubric, and finally, we'll talk about the ultimate goal, making sure our scores are fair and reliable. Okay, let's kick things off with our first section, the art of scoring performance. Because before you can measure anything, you've got to know what it is you're looking at, right? So, at its core, performance scoring is all about one thing. What can a learner actually do with the language? We're not just checking if they can pick the right answer from a list. We're looking at how they create language on the fly, whether they're speaking or writing. And that just calls for a completely different playbook than your standard fill-in-the-bubble test. And this is where it gets tricky, and I think this slide really nails why. For one, it takes human judgment. There's no machine that can perfectly appreciate the nuance of a really persuasive speech. Then you've got the fact that these tasks are totally open-ended. There's no single correct way to tell a story. And finally, this whole thing is meant to reflect how complex language is in the real world, and that real-world messiness is what makes it so hard to grade fairly every single time. That whole challenge of human judgment leads us perfectly into our second section, which is all about a fundamental choice we have to make in assessment, the tug-of-war between objective and subjective judgment. Okay, so this lays out the two sides of the coin perfectly. On one hand, you've got objective scoring, your classic multiple choice test. Super reliable, right? You're either right or you're wrong. But let's be real, it's not going to tell you if someone can actually hold a decent conversation. Then on the other hand, you have subjective scoring. This is where we grade essays and interviews. It's awesome for capturing real communication skills, but it can also be inconsistent. One person's A is another's B-. So the real name of the game is figuring out how to make those subjective calls as solid and consistent as possible. So how do we actually do that? How do we make it work? Well, that brings us to our third section. Think of this as opening up a toolkit. We've got 3 main tools inside, and each one is for a different kind of job. All right, tool number 1, holistic scoring. This is what I like to call the big picture approach. You read the whole essay, you listen to the whole speech, and then you give it one single score based on your overall gut feeling. It's fast, it's efficient, and it's great for getting a quick snapshot of where a student is at overall. Next up, we've got analytic scoring. Now, this is the complete opposite. This is where you get out the microscope. Instead of one big picture score, you're dissecting the performance. You're giving separate scores for grammar, for vocabulary, for fluency, and so on. It takes more time, for sure, but the feedback you can give is so much more detailed and helpful. And finally, our third tool is called primary trait scoring. This one is all about focus, laser focus, actually. Here, you decide on the one thing that matters most for a specific task, and you only score that. So if you're grading a debate, you might completely ignore little grammar mistakes because all you care about is one thing. How persuasive was that argument? It's a fantastic tool when you have a very specific teaching goal in mind. So the big question is, which one do you pick? Well, this table kind of breaks it down for us. Holistic is quick and easy, but you don't get much detailed feedback. Analytic gives you that amazing specific feedback and can be more reliable, but yeah, it takes a lot more time. It's really that classic tug of war, right? Speed versus detail. All of this talk about methods and judgment leads us to what might be the single most important tool in our entire toolkit. So let's dive into section 4, rubrics. These are your blueprint for fairness. Okay, so first things first, a rubric is way, way more than just a score sheet. Think of it like a GPS for grading. It's a detailed map that clearly describes what excellent looks like, what good looks like, and what needs improvement looks like. Because it lays everything out, it takes a lot of the guesswork out of grading and makes the whole process way more fair and clear for everybody. So what makes a good rubric? Well, good. Here are 4 golden rules. First, be super clear about exactly what you're measuring. Second, it has to be based on stuff you can actually see or hear, not just a feeling. Third, make sure it's right for your student's level. And this one is huge. Ditch those vague words like good or creative. Instead of good vocabulary, describe it. Uses a wide and precise range of words to convey meaning. See the difference? All right, so we've got our methods, we've got our rubrics, we're feeling pretty good. But now it's time for the final stress test. Let's move into section 5, making sure our scores are actually fair and reliable. At the end of the day, the name of the game is reliability. I mean, think about it this way. If two different qualified teachers grade the same essay, they should land on a pretty similar score, right? And if you grade an essay on a Monday, you should give it the same score if you grade it again on Friday. That consistency, that's the foundation everything else is built on. Without it, the assessment isn't really fair. And this idea of reliability actually comes in two main flavors. First, you have inter-rater reliability. That's just a fancy way of asking, do different graders give the same score? And then there's intra-rater reliability. This one's about you. Are you consistent from one day to the next? To have a really strong, fair system, you need to be solid on both. Now, the great news here is that reliability isn't just luck. It's something you can build. You do it with things like solid training for everyone who's grading. You use benchmark examples, so everyone's on the same page about what a 4 looks like. You use those awesome, clear rubrics we just talked about. And for really important tests, you have 2 people score everything. But hold on. Even if a score is perfectly reliable, there's one more, even deeper question we have to ask ourselves. Is it valid? In other words, are we really measuring what we think we're measuring? Like, are we scoring their speaking ability, or are we getting distracted by their accent? Are we scoring the quality of their argument, or are we secretly biased because we agree with their point of view? Validity is that ultimate gut check on whether our scores truly mean what we say they mean. Okay, wow, we have covered a lot. Let's wrap this up and boil it down to the key takeaways. Number 1, scoring performance isn't just an extra, it's essential for seeing what students can really do. Number 2, subjectivity isn't a bad word as long as you guide it with a solid rubric. Number 3, that analytic method gives amazing feedback, but it's an investment of time. And finally, reliability and validity, they're not just buzzwords. They're basically the 2 pillars of fairness in assessment. So in the end, you can see that good scoring is so much more than just circling mistakes with a red pen. It's this really cool blend, right? It's part science with a structured, clear rubric, but it's also part art, the art of being a great teacher. It's about building a system that isn't just fair, but one that gives learners the clear, meaningful feedback they actually need to get better. And isn't that what it's all about?